Pranakasha live stream. Hey folks, it's Matt at Pranakasha Productions, and today we are interviewing Tom Swafford, who's an old friend of mine from way back. Now how long has it been? It's got to be like 10 or 20 years since we've actually seen each other.
Yeah,
Yeah.
probably close between
Maybe
maybe
30?
sometime in the early 2000s. Not 30 yet. Not quite
Okay.
that long, but
It doesn't seem that long because we've been sending each other emails and stuff now and then. And like I know I'm on your
yeah,
newsletter, so I get a lot of your updates and stuff. So
right.
that's wild. Are you still living in New York City?
No, we just moved to Providence
Okay.
last fall.
Okay,
So
cool.
we're in Providence, Rhode Island now.
Oh, Rhode Island, okay. Anyway, so this is Tom Swafford, fellow musician, violinist, composer, and do you play any other instruments besides violin?
Yeah, I play piano,
Oh, piano, okay.
but
And then
violin's the main instrument.
probably a little bit of viola too, right? Any
I've
violin?
dabbled in viola. I never actually owned a viola, so
Okay. Yeah, that's the first step. Then you have to figure out the clef. But if you're like a composer, that supposedly
right.
isn't that big of a deal, you
Yeah,
know?
definitely. Right.
Ah,
I figured it out from the composing angle, but somehow playing from the clef is a little trickier.
yeah. Well, there's the trick about you just pretend like you're in third position, and then that kind of it's like third position on the violin. That's the real quick trick. But then what I finally do
Oh,
is
never.
you never heard that one? Because like okay,
No.
we're already getting into technicalities here, but like so in alto clef, the top line is a G, which is on in treble clef that would be an F, which would be the F on the E
Right.
string,
Okay.
but it's a G in alto, which is the third finger on the D string, right? But if you
Okay.
pretend you're playing violin, then your D string becomes your A string. And then if you pretend you're playing violin in third position, then third finger in third position on the A string um, sounds a no, wait a minute. Okay, hold on. Yeah, it looks like an F. It looks like an F to a violinist
Ah,
in third position,
but it's really a
but it's
G.
really a G for a violist. Anyway,
Oh, so you just. Oh man.
yeah,
Well,
it's a
that if
trick.
I ever get a viola, I'll. That's
Yeah,
that's a good starting place, I guess. But you're playing cello now, so you're taking it up to a whole new level.
yeah, that's true. And you know what? For years, I could not play tenor clef. I had a hell of a time playing tenor clef because I kept trying to transpose it until one day I finally realized, oh crap. It's the same thing as bass clef, except you go up a string. It's a fifth, it looks a fifth higher, or it sounds a fifth higher than what bass clef is. And I'm like, oh, well, that's way easier to figure out. But it took me years. Nobody told me that trick.
Ah,
So,
okay.
because, okay, here we go again. So, like in bass clef, the the top line is an open A string on the cello.
Oh yeah, yeah.
But if
Okay.
you go to tenor clef, that top line is
E.
an E, right? It's a
Ah,
fifth higher, which that particular thing doesn't help you that much. But if you go down to the D string, what looks like a D string in bass clef now is an A string in tenor clef.
okay.
So once I figured that trick out, that helped a lot. But
Right,
anyway,
right.
all these technical things.
Yeah.
So, and like, so I'm trying to remember where we met. Did we meet at Seattle Philharmonic? Is that where we met?
Well, my mom was really involved in the Seattle Phil, so
Right. You.
cellist and all that. So that's I think that's how I first heard about you, and because you were
Okay.
concertmaster, I think.
Right.
But we may have overlapped in this youth symphony.
Seattle
Jim
Youth.
Mahara, yeah, Seattle Youth Symphony, maybe. I know Jim Mahara was in it,
Okay.
and I was, I had just gone out of junior symphony and made my way to the very back of the second violins. And you may
Okay.
have been in the front. I'm not sure.
Do you remember what year that was?
Like 88.
Oh, 88. That was Mr. Sokol's last year. Wasn't that
Oh,
when we
yeah.
did the Mahler 10th?
I think it was maybe a year before that. I don't remember Mahler 10th. So
Okay.
I'd gotten out. I made it to finally made it to youth symphony, and then I was like, oh god, I can't work
Can't
my
do
way
this.
all the way up. This is gonna take forever. So,
Okay.
but
Because
yeah, I don't think. Yeah, I think it was. I think the Mahler 10th maybe was after that. I'm not sure.
okay, you want to know what's really funny? I'm now playing in Seattle Festival Orchestra as a cellist. At the last concert I sat second chair cello, and that orchestra used to be conducted by Jim Mahara.
Okay.
So that's another
Wow.
thing.
Full circle.
I know. All this stuff always happens. But
Wow.
okay, well, let's talk about you first. So now I mean, we've reminisced, and now we know that you're a violinist and a composer.
Uh-huh.
And now I'm encouraging you to be a violist, just for
Right.
the heck of it. Because I don't know if you knew this, but like Mozart and Mendelssohn both played viola as well as violin and
Oh,
piano.
wow. You never hear about that. I know Dvorak was a violist.
Oh, okay, I didn't know that.
I think so. That's why
Okay,
there's, but I did not know that about
yeah,
Mozart, Mendelssohn. That
yeah.
makes
And of course, Mozart played the organ too. I think Mendelssohn might have also been an organist, but I'm not sure about that one.
wow.
It
That makes
seems
sense.
like almost all composers are at least pianists.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, phone turn off, go away. Yeah. Um, sorry. So you're doing like, so I guess so maybe we sort of knew each other in Youth Symphony, but then your mom played cello in Seattle Philharmonic
Yeah,
when Nico Snell was the conductor,
yeah, yeah,
and I think your mom was on the board too, right?
yeah. She was on the board. She was a
Yeah,
librarian. She was doing all kinds of stuff.
right. Yep. She was a very nice lady too. She was very supportive.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Wow. Okay. And then you moved to the East Coast. What year was that?
I first moved for college. I went to Tufts in Boston, and
Oh,
that was in
Tufts. Okay.
'91. Yeah, so in '91 I moved, uh, and then I did was in Boston till '95, and then I was in Berkeley, California for grad school. So I
Okay.
kind of bounced coasts,
Oh.
and then in the early 2000s I was back in Seattle for about 4 years, and then
Oh,
in
really?
2007 I moved back to uh, to the East Coast and moved to New York City. So yeah,
So you were in the Seattle area for 7 years in the 2000s?
yeah, about 4 years, I think, 2002 to 2007. So 4.5 years.
Huh.
That's when I started playing with Joe Bixel at this public.
Well, I mean, I've been playing with Joe for 30 years
Yeah,
in
it was Trio
Trio Con Brio
Cambrio.
right there.
Right. It was some version of Trio Cambrio. They were busking at the Pike Place
What's
Market.
this? Hold just a second. Wait. What year are you talking about? Because I was in Trio Con Brio like in 91.
Oh, and we played some gigs, I think. You, Joe, and I played at the church in Bremerton. Um,
Not Bremerton, in Burien.
Burien,
Yeah.
right.
And we still play those gigs.
Oh,
We
man.
still play once a month at St.
Yeah.
Francis
So I saw
Church.
you. Yeah, I came in and, as a sub for um, whoever the other violinist was
Why
at
the
that
heck did
point.
I block that out? I don't
Yeah.
even remember. It might
A
not have
handful
been
of
that
times.
many gigs then.
And then they were just I was busking on my own at the Pike Place Market just for something, to try it out.
Right.
And Joe and Christina Cruz happened to be there playing. And they're like,
Oh,
"Oh,
okay.
come and play, Eine kleine and pocket, read from the books.
Yeah,
So
we
I was
still
like,
use
oh,
those
much more
books.
fun. He sent me like PDFs of all that music, which is really nice. But
Yeah.
yeah, so I did quite a bit in front of the Pike Place Market. Usually, I think it was always Joe and Christina, and it
Oh,
was
that's
called
why I don't
Drill Theory.
remember.
Yeah,
Okay. So so for some reason, well, I forget. At some point, I didn't want to play at the market that much anymore. So maybe you were technically subbing for me, and that's why we never really
yeah.
saw
We
each
didn't
other.
overlap at the market, I don't think so.
Okay, maybe that's why. Okay, interesting. That's really interesting.
Yeah.
Um, but did you play with Jeff Yang? Was he in the group during that
No,
time?
I remember hearing his name, but I don't think I played with him.
Okay, because interestingly enough, now he tours with Mannheim Steamroller
Oh, wow. Okay.
and plays like this clear acrylic electric violin,
Oh man.
and he owns a violin shop in Chicago too.
Oh, so
Yeah,
he's out of Seattle and doing a whole different thing. That's exciting.
yeah, yep. That's Jeff.
Did you
So,
never know Starla Nelson, I
oh
think?
yeah, she took lessons from my mom.
Ah,
Yeah,
she ended up.
Starla.
I think she ended up playing with Andre Rieu, if I'm not
Um,
mistaken.
did she? I didn't know that because I knew one of my mom's. I knew there was another person in my life that played in Andre Rieu's orchestra.
Okay, maybe I've
That
gotten
way,
that mixed
but
up.
that person. This is really funny. This person I knew when I was in kindergarten. Her name
Oh
was
my God.
Monica Doss when I lived in Ann Arbor, Michigan.
Oh,
Yeah, and we used to play. I go over to their house and we played Candyland and like Operation and stuff like that.
oh my gosh.
So, but she's one of my Facebook friends, so every once in a while I see her posts.
And
And
she's still with him, like
yeah, as far as I know.
in his castle in Europe somewhere.
Yeah. Well, Starla is living in Europe now.
Okay.
I think she's in Austria. She got married and she has like 3 kids. And
Okay.
yeah, and then you know what? You might have been um did you ever know Lisa Bergman, pianist?
Yeah, I watched some of her interview, and I
Oh,
heard her.
the
Yeah,
one that she did with me?
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And
Yeah,
I
so
heard
you're
her
from
name.
that.
Did she play with Philharmonic? Was she a pianist with the orchestra at some point? Or?
Not what she said. What she said was she played at the UW. She was like the rehearsal pianist
Oh,
for the opera,
oh yeah.
and also she played for the conducting classes. And I think she was getting her master's degree in the early '90s at the UW too. So you might have ran into her like that
Okay.
as well. Yeah. And now she's a DJ for King FM, and
Oh, that's how I know.
but she's still playing. Was what she said. In fact, I'm
Yeah.
trying to get us together and do something this summer. See what
Oh,
happens.
cool.
Yeah, that's really wild. Okay, so you went to Boston, then
Yeah.
you went to Berkeley. So at Berkeley, you got like your master's degree or something like that, or?
Yeah, I got a PhD in composition.
Oh, cool.
Um, yeah.
Okay, we got a lot talked about. So, so what did they teach you over there, anyways? Because I don't know if you know this, but I was, um, I'm part of the Delian Society, which is, unfortunately, the founder died of a heart attack a few years ago, and since then, it's kind of, um, it's not gone, but it's really lost a lot of its steam. But it
Oh,
was founded by Joseph Dillon Ford, who loved composing what he would call historical music in a historical style. Like he wrote a harpsichord concerto,
oh gosh.
in the
Okay.
style of like Vivaldi or something like that.
Ah,
And he wrote a piano concerto that was very Beethoven-esque and so on. And his whole thing was at some point he wanted to go to the university. I can't remember which one it was, and he wanted to, compose in these styles, and the academia would have nothing to do with it. They just
oh yeah.
flat out discounted it. They wouldn't even listen to it. They wouldn't even think of that idea. Like you had to compose modern music, or else there was no point in composing. And
Right.
so he was like, "Well, F you, I want to compose like this." So he left, and he started this whole movement of what he called historicism. Just he found other composers of similar mind that were like, you know what, I don't care what they think. I like to compose in these styles, and I'm going to do it because I that's what I want to do.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
he
Sure.
gathered people like that, and this was like maybe 15 years ago. The internet was just starting to picking up steam, and there was these composers forums where people would have these huge heated arguments about this exact subject.
Ah.
And
Okay.
that's where I found him, and I participated in the arguments quite a bit too. And anyway, things have changed a lot, as you know now. It's like I don't know in academia if it's well, it has changed quite a bit, but so okay, so that's the backdrop. So when you went to Berkeley, like what kind of music did you want to compose, and what kind of music did you have to compose?
Ah. Okay. That's interesting. Yeah. I was interested. I've always been interested in jazz.
Okay,
Uh, Music out of that tradition, and I wanted to study with Ollie Wilson, who's he was an African American composer, and I heard some of his music at Tufts. He's connected to an ensemble at Tufts, so
okay.
um, I just thought I'd played jazz piano in high school. I
Oh,
went to
really?
Roosevelt, and so that was my other life. So I still play piano.
Oh, you
Uh,
went to Roosevelt. Okay, I
yeah,
didn't know
yeah,
that. Okay.
yeah. So there, um, Scott Brown, who's still there, was the jazz band director. So
Okay.
um, I played piano in that, and then at this, played in the chamber orchestra and the regular orchestra. So I had two things going at once, but so I'd always been interested in integrating that into my music, and
Cool.
so the stuff that I wrote at Tufts, which I was basically at that point the only composer at Tufts, one of very few composers, and I had a lot of support there. I actually tried to go. I originally wanted to go to the New England Conservatory and Tufts because
Okay.
they had a dual degree program, but I didn't get into the New England Conservatory part of it, so I just went to Tufts. But I had a really supportive teacher that I'm still in touch with, John McDonald,
Oh,
um,
great.
great pianist and composer. So but I think even he was kind of steering me towards modern music. But then it was like Ralph Shapey, and it was dissonant modern. Avoiding anything tonal was kind of not really
Cool.
taken seriously.
So you still had to do, so it had to be atonal, like literally tone rows and stuff like that, like Schoenberg type
No,
of
I
stuff,
mean,
or
well, with John, he was totally open. So I shouldn't.
okay.
I mean, I don't want to. He was open to anything, but kind of steering me away from like triadic. I was kind of writing like real simple, not in any particular style, but
Uh-huh.
definitely tonal, and started to get more dissonant and more like augmented, tritones and major sevenths and little nothing strict, not strictly. Shostako. I was a big Shostakovich fan, and
Right.
I thought that was pretty edgy, but I got to Berkeley. I wrote a violin concerto, which I still like, but it sounded pretty close to Shostakovich, I guess.
Huh.
And they
Hmm.
nobody was. I'd come in there thinking, oh yeah, well everybody's gonna think I'm so cool, and then
Right.
my
Yeah.
my teacher that year, Mr. Duggar, Professor Duggar, was not into it at all.
Yeah.
And so I
It's
think
like, so I'm gonna interrupt the So did you ever perform that violin concerto?
I did. I
Oh,
did at
cool.
the end of Tufts, my senior year at Tufts. Yeah, yeah, just one movement of it.
With orchestra?
Yeah, yeah.
Because nowadays, like, do you use Finale or Sibelius?
Sibelius.
Okay, I use
Yeah.
Finale, but I don't. Have you used Note Performer with that?
No, I haven't heard of Note Performer.
It's a relatively new sound library, and it only costs like 150 bucks. But it's
Ah,
apparently it's got some AI behind it, so that it's able to create a really realistic sounds. So
oh,
like now you can run it through either Sibelius or Finale. I use Finale, and it
uh,
comes out sounding darn good. The
wow.
orchestra stuff. So what I was thinking is, if you had that score still, you could you could have it that accompany, and you could like lay down a new the whole concerto or something sometime.
Wow,
Yeah.
that's great. That's great. Yeah, I would have to. I'd have to update my Sibelius. I have. It ran out, so I have only the free one now. So
Oh
it
yeah.
no
Okay.
longer
Yeah. It's
doesn't
it's
communicate with my operating system
yeah.
anymore.
You got it. Okay. What operating system do you got?
Oh God, whatever. I don't know.
Is it Windows or a
It's
Mac?
Mac. Yeah.
Okay. I don't know that very well. Whatever it is. But oh, so um, s- yeah, because that'd be cool. So
Yeah, that's great.
How long is your violin concerto?
Oh, it's two movements. I never, when I was had any idea, I never got it. Oh, it's probably it's, yeah.
I totally lost you there. When you got garbled. How many minutes?
Oh, about 15 minutes
Oh,
altogether.
okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's that's fun. Well, have you written any string quartets?
Yeah. Yep.
Did you? Or actually, let me just back up. So when you were at Berkeley, so you had the violin concerto, and there was a rather lukewarm reception to it by the
Yes. Exactly.
culture there.
And
So
then, so my whole first, I mean, I guess I'd written, and I tried to write kind of a jazz influenced piece for clarinet and saxophone that was kind of frowned upon. But then the next semester, I wrote a violin and cello piece, which I kind of like. It was kind of free form, dissonant, not totally, not harsh, but a lot of dissonant intervals
okay.
I can't even remember what my process was, but it seemed to go over a little better. But then when so the person Ollie Wilson who I wanted to study with, you don't get to choose your teacher the first year. So I had and this Edwin Duggar, who was a student of Roger Sessions, so he's coming out of a fully serial 12-tone tradition from
Mm.
Princeton, and nobody's really and previously, like back in the 60s and 70s, Berkeley was all 12 tone, but by the time I came along, it was looser, but still like anything tonal was, not taken seriously. So
Yeah.
by the time I got to my second year, I studied with Ollie Wilson, who was super supportive, and I wrote an orchestra piece because I was the TA for the orchestra, and that was a perk of
Ooh, that's
that
nice.
job was there, and the conductor there is excellent. He's also still there,
Oh, cool.
David Milnes. Um, so he did a great job. That's probably the best, most rehearsals I've ever gotten for anything.
Oh, cool.
He rehearsed the piece really well. It was only about a 7-minute piece, and I would say I would call it tonal. It was sort of based on a blues progression at a certain point, but it used a couple of just four pitches that I kind of made melodies in out of these four pitches and sounded went from a romantic to kind of a funky uh, rhythmic kind of groove thing to sort of corny polka like thing. So it had a lot of different styles, but still kind of held together by those four pitches. But
Yeah, you know what's
somehow that
interesting?
one went over better. What's that?
You know what's interesting is it's like those movements were so hung up on the the language, the tonal language, right? And the harmonic language. But
Yeah,
they never talked about the rhythm, you know?
yeah,
And that's like the rhythm is what's like the thing that gives the music the life.
Oh
Like for
yeah,
example, like if you go into pop music, for example, all pop music is all tonal. It all uses basically the same chord progressions, right?
yeah,
Unless
right.
they throw in some jazzy chords, which
Yeah, maybe
nowadays,
a
well, actually,
seventh
there's a lot of
here
pop
and there.
music nowadays that, well, they're not now, but like in the 90s that had some really jazzy chords in it. But it's like,
Yeah,
it's basically this, everybody's using pretty much the same harmonic language,
right.
but there's umpteen jillion styles that's all produced by the rhythm and the nuance and all that, you know?
Yeah,
And that's
that's
what your
definitely
non-musician lay listener picks up on is all that stuff.
right.
They don't
Yeah,
care if it's like a four chord or a six chord or a two chord or a
yeah,
Neapolitan or whatever.
yeah. If
You
you
know?
just reduce it down to that, that's not. Yeah, that's not really the point of it, right? There's
Yeah,
much going on besides what you could transcribe on a, if you just were to
yeah,
transcribe just the pitches,
yeah.
that,
And what I also discovered, at least my theory about, like, for example, Shostakovich or even Prokofiev, is what I realize that what they do is that their music is actually very tonal. It's just that they keep modulating like every two bars, you know? So they move the pit, they move like the center around, but like within that frame of when they're in a certain key for, two or three bars, it's very what you would call tonal, and that was kind of how they created that sort of style that they did, you know? So it's like,
right.
and it worked for what they want to express. And then, anyways, yeah, this is this hot
Yeah,
topic that
interesting.
brings up
Like
a
a
lot for
lot of,
me, actually.
yeah.
um,
I mean, there's a lot of areas between not non-tonal and tonal. What's considered tonal, like in the most conservative sense of the word. So yeah,
yeah.
there's a lot of different possibilities.
So you hung out, but so you got your master. Did you already have a master's when you went to Berkeley? And then you just got
No,
your doctorate?
bachelor's. Yeah, they do. Your first 2 years, you get your master's degree. You have to take a little test, and usually you just keep on going, and for another 2 or 3 years to get the PhD.
Great. So you're actually Dr. Swafford.
Yeah. I am technically Dr. Swafford. I don't feel it's kind of a Berkeley, and I'm not sure if they're still doing it this way, but usually for a PhD you write a thesis. There's some written words component, but at Berkeley it was kind of more like I think what DMA usually is. It's just a piece. So I just wrote a big orchestra piece and had my oral exam, but no, I didn't have to write a big thesis or I didn't really have to defend the piece either. I just
Hmm.
had it performed and you know. So I don't know. I think other people have to
Interesting.
work harder for their for their doctorates, but
Well, you still got it though. So,
yeah, I got the paper.
and it's from a well-known school. So that's a nice academic credential. Now that it seems like something like that is mostly useful if you want to continue in academic land and like now become a professor or something like that, right?
Yeah, that's pretty much yeah. Most I think if you're trying to have a whatever kind of career as a musician, not or a composer or anything, I don't think too many people are interested in what your what letters you could put after your name. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, of course, unless you end up becoming a denizen of music history, and then people want to go study your life, and they're like, "Oh, he went to Berkeley,"
Yeah.
like, or he studied in the Paris Conservatoire,
Oh,
the
now that's the real deal.
Etude, Paris Conservatoire de Paris.
Boulanger.
Yeah. Wow, that's neat. So and
But
that
yeah,
orchestra
no,
piece is the one that you described, the 7 minute piece.
no, that was the first orchestra piece, which I
Okay.
still think is one of my best pieces.
Oh,
The second orchestra piece was for my dissertation, which was uh, about 20 or 25-minute long piece that I worked pretty hard on it. That's interesting, but I think I'm happier with the first orchestra piece. It's
Hmm. Why do you think that is?
well, I think trying to write such a long piece at that point, uh, it just didn't hang together as well. It just was like padding it out, like, oh, this is my dissertation. And I don't even remember if there was a stipulation on how long the dissertation needed to be, but I figured this is a dissertation. I have to, make it a substantial length. And at that point, I'm not sure if this is, I definitely wrote it out in longhand or sketched it out anyway. But at that point, I had a computer, and the first piece I didn't have a computer, so
Oh,
I wrote out. I even orchestrated it on paper, which is amazing. Uh,
I did that once.
and then I had to have
Yeah.
people, and of course the violin concerto was the same thing. I had to have my friends write out all the parts and everything. It was
Oh
pretty
wow,
old
that's
school.
like it was super old school. You didn't
Yeah.
even write out your own parts. You had
No,
like
well, I
you had
couldn't.
a
I was just
crew
trying to
that
get
did
it
it.
done and ready for the performance. So I was like, I had to recruit. I think both for the
Huh.
concerto and that first orchestra piece, I had to. Although I had one friend who was already on the computer, so I think the string parts were. He did the string parts on the computer, so it was probably for the best, so they could actually be was legible. But yeah, so I don't know. I think maybe I don't think I like just literally like did computer shortcuts. Like, oh, I got to make this piece so long, so I'll just take all this just copy it and
Copy
paste
and
it.
paste it, or like
I hope
take
I
it, transpose it up a fifth,
yeah.
and there's another 7 minutes right
Yeah,
there.
right. That would be the cheat. Oh man, that would be such a cheat. But oh gosh. So anyway, um, yeah, I think it was just and I wrote another orchestra piece after that when I was in Seattle.
Okay.
Pretty interesting. That was the Degenerate Art Ensemble. They did a concert in 2005. They usually do like really theatrical, super crazy out theatrical pieces. And But for this, they did an orchestra concert, just a straight up orchestra. Although the piece that uh, Joshua wrote, he and Haruko are the core of the Degenerate Art Ensemble. So
Okay.
um, yeah, and they're still really active. Um,
Huh, I
so
haven't even heard of
yeah,
them. And they're in
yeah,
Seattle?
they're from Seattle. Yep.
Huh.
I know they were originally called the Young Composers Collective, and I think they were both at Cornish, like in the
Hmm.
'90s.
Okay.
And they formed this group that was, I mean, I think they do really cool stuff.
Uh-huh.
Um, and Joshua's, so uh, he's actually my cousin, like something like second cousin or something. Um, anyway, he so anyway, in 2005, they put this big concert at the Moore Theater together. They also have like a following and stuff, which is totally crazy. That's like unheard of for me. For me, like, oh wow, people actually, they had a lot of people at this thing,
Oh,
and
that's cool.
so they put together a big orchestra. I got used a lot of Philharmonic people.
Seattle Phil. Okay.
Then, because I was he had me contract the orchestra for it. Um, so anyway, I wrote as sort of an exchange for all that. I got to write a piece for this group, and that was a pretty interesting piece. It had some
That's great.
improvising in it, and
Okay.
um, yeah, I had a sax solo, and I had like one of the percussion players does a lot of improvisation with found objects, and Evelyn Mueller Graf, who's still active, still doing stuff. Everybody is, but anyway, I kind of like just said let her go. I just gave her some instructions, and she kind of
Okay.
did her own thing back there.
Kind of a guided
It worked.
improv type of thing.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. Okay. And this was after you'd gotten your doctorate, right?
Yeah, and then for a year in between, after Berkeley and before I came back to Seattle, I was in Amsterdam, and I studied with this composer Louis Andriessen, um,
Okay.
which was like once a month. And then, but that was officially the reason I was out there, was to work with him, and because he had worked with, he works with jazz musicians, and his kind of stuff is like, cross genre kind
Okay.
of music. So that's kind of why I wanted to work with him. But then I just attended the conservatory in the Hague and went to the composition seminars and stuff like that for a year. So it was my
Wow.
out of the country experience.
That's great. So, how good of a jazz pianist are you these days? Like, are you like one of these monster players that just like can do anything,
No,
you know?
not, not at all. I could play. I like to play. I mean,
uh,
and I think I have a nice musical feel, and I could play a ballad, and I could, hold my own on. But I can definitely not, like, I couldn't do stride piano or anything like that. I think I played. Yeah, so I think I could play cocktail piano or whatever, and it would sound nice, and I like to. But
mess around. Do you find yourself improvising a lot on the piano when you're composing? Like, do you
I
just go
have
and,
in the past
you
when
know?
I've had access to a piano, and that's how I. It's interesting. The stuff I write on violin
Uh-huh.
is a lot different than the stuff I write um, on piano.
Right.
It's a lot more. It's a little more conservative when I write it on the piano, because I'm thinking of chords and harmonies, and in violin I like to get really out there sometimes, and I do a lot of free improv on the
Right.
violin. So, um, but it all has a little bit of tonal. There's something there's a tonal element to everything, I think, anyway.
Yeah. Well,
But
okay. I mean, the thing that I would always go to when I got into these arguments with composers about it, I would say, well, all you have to do is look at the overtone series, and you can see there's chords that are built in that series. So obviously, it's not like we are all been brainwashed to hear tonal music. I mean, there's a reason why if you go all around the world, every music in every culture has a certain basis to it that's the same. And so, I mean, where I come from, it's because it's just the way that the human ear perceives sound, and also the way that sound waves complement each other and cancel each other out, because you got consonant sounds like octaves and fifths, that are perfect ratios and all, everything I'm talking about, right?
yeah,
And I'm
yeah,
like, well, and that I can totally see how that's how, 1451 just came straight out of that. It's just part of the physics of the universe,
or
you
nature,
know?
yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's kind of cool to try to go against that. But it's not surprising that when you do go seriously against that, you create music that's disturbing and really bizarre and has a weird emotional effect, which is fine if that's what you want, but it's kind of dumb when you have to always compose that way, you know?
Yeah,
It's dumb to
I
have to
think it,
force composers to always be that far on the edge,
right.
you
Music is
know?
only this. It has to be this, and don't ever write anything with a triad in it, or yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Even at Berkeley, that was even one. Oh, that's a little bit too. That's too much of a bare triad.
You got
You
to
have
add
to
something to that.
add
Throw a
something. Yeah,
13th on it and then
exactly.
it'll be fine. See, that's the thing what I thought was
Yeah,
complete bullshit. Whereas like suppose I write a piece that is pretty conservative harmonically, but they categorically denounce it and don't even want to listen to it, right? When I know in my head, all I'd have to do is throw in some dissonances, some random dissonances, and a few cheap tricks, to make it sound 20th century, and then suddenly everybody in the department will like it. And I'm like, well, that's stupid. It's just a gimmick, and if I don't want to use that gimmick in my
Yeah.
music, why should I? You know? So, and the other thing that I always
Yeah.
argued is, I mean, once you do throw in all those extra techniques, you can cover up a mountain of sins, just because it obfuscates everything. It's just you're throwing in a bunch of special effects and everything and basically confuses the person's ear. So it's really easy to use that to cover up basically a pretty dumb musical idea, you know? So
Right.
so it's really easy to hide behind all those techniques too. And so when I came to that realization, I'm like, you know what? Forget it. I'm not going to play that game. All it is a politics game. And it's basically just some weird, what clique do you want to be part of, And depending on what
Yeah.
what techniques your music used determines which clique you're going to be part of. So it's all some completely different thing that really has nothing to do with music. So I
Yeah.
finally decided, you know what, forget it. I'm just gonna forget about that stuff and just write stuff that I like to write.
Yeah.
That speaks to
Absolutely.
me. That I like to play, and So anyway,
Yeah. I mean, I've been out of academia since I got out of Berkeley, really. And I feel like I think it's moving more in that direction, actually. There's more tonal music. There's more, I think
very
there's
much.
a lot of really beautiful music. And
Oh yeah.
it's also, like Philip Glass has influenced a lot of
Mm-hmm.
music. And, you know, I'm not always, I don't love it. Well, I like Philip Glass, but I'm not sure. Sometimes I hear some music that's Philip Glass influence, and I think, wow, sounds a lot like Philip Glass, and I don't know if I want to
Yeah.
hear
Well, like
something
there's
too
another
close.
one. Arvo Part, right? He's got a couple pretty famous
Oh yeah,
pieces now that people really dig. Of course, one of the reasons why they dig it is because it's so consonant. That I mean, it's the
yeah,
exact opposite. It's just all just super white notes type of stuff, super um, modal music. And then there's Von Williams. His music's very modal, and people just naturally like it because you're hearing a lot of consonant chords, and it just sort of naturally vibrates with you, and you like it,
yeah,
you know.
yeah. Same.
And
Glass. Sure.
so, but people like Arvo Part, they really dig it, but I like it too for what it is, but I wouldn't say it's genius, you know? I mean, I would say that he found a space that speaks to him and he composed what he really wanted to compose, and I think he did it very well. But I wouldn't say that it's like heads and shoulders above any other 20th century composers.
Yeah,
I'll say the same thing about John Adams. Like, he's one of the big names, but his music isn't that much better than anybody else's. It's not that much better or that much worse than I can think of 1,000 other composers that are alive
yeah.
today
Hard to
that are
say.
about the same level as him. But
Right?
again, I think what I finally decided too is it's like a lot of things where the trick is to have a halfway decent product and then figure out how to market it well.
Yes, marketing. It's big
so
time marketing.
so once you read that, if you get to that realization, which is what most pop artists discover pretty early on in their career, right? Once you realize that, it's the same thing in
Yeah, yeah,
classical. Then it's again this whole thing about what style of music you have to write in order to be popular is completely thrown out the window. The question is popular with who? Like popular with a handful of professors at my university, or popular
yeah,
with 50 or so academic composers in the world right now? Is that your audience? Or is it popular with the musicians that play your piece? Is that going to be your audience? Or is it going to be
yeah,
popular with the movie directors that you write your movie music for? or for the people that play the video games that you write the background music for? That's the question: is who is your audience, or is it just yourself? If it's long as you feel good about it and you know you created something true to yourself, is that good enough? Those are the pretty deep questions
Yeah.
that a lot of composers, at least those are the things that were always going through my mind when I was trying to figure out what I wanted to do with my own composing, you know?
I've had all those exact same thoughts myself, and I
Yeah,
still trying to figure it out. But yeah, I have a friend that's um, from Berkeley he's probably the most I hear about him the most now. He's had a pretty good career for himself. Um, he teaches at a school on Long Island. His name's Trevor Weston, and I saw an interesting interview with him where, as a teacher, this is so different from what I remember. The kind of ethos was at Berkeley. But he said he has his students start from where they're at. They already have their music that they enjoy and that's part of them, and you start from that point and develop that rather than
great.
trying to adhere to a tradition. And because there's definitely techniques and ways of structuring music, and there are definitely skills that you learn when you study composition, but
Right, it's a
it's
bag of tricks. You learn a certain bag of tricks, and
but
so it's
it's
good to be
not.
exposed to that kind of stuff. I'm not against
And
that.
I think it, yeah, and I think you know, hey, try writing some some serial music and try writing in the style of Debussy and any other kinds of music, just to be exposed to it. And I even think like it would be cool to study, tape music and actually have to cut out tape and splice it together to have the experience of it. But when it comes to like, oh, your music is only valuable if it adheres to this particular, um, fits into this particular box. I think that's kind of over. That's kind of over as
Good.
far
I'm
as I could
glad.
tell. But I haven't, but there's still, but at the same time, there's still, there's music that gets attention and there's music that it doesn't, and it's still hard to figure out. But it's all, it's a kind of a mystery to me. But
Yeah.
um,
Well, I know my measure of success is whether you write a piece, whether it gets performed. And
yeah,
then if it gets a performance, then if it gets a good performance, and then if it gets two performances, that's like really successful.
wow, yeah,
So, but
you're really onto something.
you can stack the deck with that though, like what I do now, at least for the orchestral pieces that I write. I already have a performance in mind, and I've already got a group on the hook to perform it.
Ah,
You
yeah.
know, and what I realized that has always been the case. Like when Mozart
Yeah,
wrote a symphony that had two horns and two oboes but no bassoons. It's because that particular orchestra that he wrote it for had those people in it.
yeah, right.
You know,
That's
so
interesting. Yeah, I'm of that mind too, that I wanna, if I'm, even though I like the idea of note flight and being to partly so I can get a sense at least of what the music actually is going to sound like. But in terms of like, if you're writing music for human beings to play, it's only really realized when you actually have the performance with people. And
right,
because that's like, there's no, even with the best sounds, it's not the piece until you
got
hear
real
it
people in
played.
it.
Well, yeah.
Yeah,
And unless, I guess, like, I mean, if you're really and have the really great stuff and you want to write for movies, and I've thought that too, like, oh, if I really pushed myself and I could write something that could go in a movie, but and just on a computer, because I think like a lot of that stuff is fully, at least for some independent movies or something, if
right.
somebody was like, I want an orchestra music for this. They can't obviously not get an orchestra. So if you, I
I
guess
don't
if
have
you,
$100,000 to
yeah,
pay him all to do it.
yeah. I actually, when I first got to New York, I was going on Craigslist. That was still a thing, and and I was trying to get as many opportunities. And I found this film student who'd written this short, had made this short film that was kind of an old timey like silent movie,
Okay.
and so I was actually house sitting for somebody, happened to be house sitting with somebody who had a nice grand piano, and I had my computer and microphones and stuff, so I recorded just some things that I on piano and violin, and I thought it was pretty good. And then but somebody else had written for this who had this crazy complicated giant orchestra piece. It was like fast notes. It was like super impressive. Obviously, all done on a computer. And I have to say, possibly over. It was a little bit too much for. It's kind of taking away the attention from what the movie was, in my opinion. But
Okay.
she went with that
Okay.
because it sounded more impressive. So who knows? But anyway, I think I agree with you that the process of having the group interacting with the people, getting the performance, is just so much more satisfying on a human level, I think.
Yeah.
And it might as well. And then it's almost like, and I definitely don't want to write a bunch of music that's just going to go in a drawer. And I'm writing for the future, and with a fantasy that someday, long after you're dead, someone's going to open the drawer
Discover
and
it.
blow the dust off. It's like
They'll
that's
find it on
not,
IMSLP and, you know,
yeah. Yeah, I don't.
ah,
Yeah, I'd much better have this in reality now than some fantasy later. So
wow. Well, so what have you got cooking right now? Like, what's your latest composition that you have written or are working on?
I wrote some pieces over the summer, um, and I'm putting on a concert at Providence College, which is right down the street from where I live. So in April, I wrote a series of songs, a couple of folk songs, and a setting of a text by H.D., this poet. Hilda Doolittle is her name, but she went by H.D. It's called Sheltered Garden. Um,
Huh.
and it's a great poem. I just went on YouTube. Well, I had kind of just researching poetry, and ran across this poem online, and then listened to YouTube. On YouTube, there's a bunch of people reading the poem, so it's kind of that helped me to get a sense of the emotional and the way that people were connecting to it, and the poem almost writes itself. It's really musical poems, like very clear, like, okay, here is like where there's a storm and things get, things start blowing around in the poem. And anyway, it's a beautiful poem. So I set that. So I'm going to have a soprano and piano pianist perform that and two other songs.
Oh, beautiful.
And then I have a real old piece I wrote in college. So um, that I've gonna perform.
You're going to
Uh,
perform it
yeah,
on
violin
violin?
piano. Yeah, it's a violin piano piece. It was a sonata. It was originally a four movement sonata, but I
Okay.
scrapped the first and last movement, and that's been done. That's one of the few pieces that's been done by anybody other than me, and it was done early in when I was at Berkeley. A violinist performed it. A violinist was playing another piece of mine at Berkeley. Said, "Do you have anything else?" And she performed that with a pianist. So
Nice.
anyway, every 5 or 10 years, I blow the dust off that piece because I like it. And then so also there's going to be one solo piano piece I wrote a couple years ago, and then some solo violin pieces. So
Just literally solo, just violin all by itself.
yeah,
Oh.
yeah,
And you're performing those,
yeah,
right?
yeah, yeah.
Cool. So how would you describe that, like that violin piece? What if you were gonna just give a pitch for it? Like, is it like a gypsy piece, or is it a Bach violin sonata, or a Ravel
Um,
Zagan, or
it's definitely not Sagan, not this one. It's a pretty it's folk influenced piece,
okay?
but it's also Bach influenced. Is called Corona Etude. I wrote it
Hmm.
while I was shuttered with my wife and my wife's stepmom on Cape Cod, and I was practicing Bach and just kind of practicing string crossings, and then I was experimenting with what happens if I just stop one string. So I put one third finger on the G and just all the rest open, and that sounds kind of nice, and started improvising and fooling around with things. So I came up with a melody, and um, yeah, so it's like simple folk influenced, Bach influenced folky piece, I guess.
Okay.
And yeah, I have that. I've recorded that one. Um, yeah, so my teacher at Tufts um, I did a little talk on Zoom with his composition class, and
Oh,
he
nice.
liked the piece. It's because it's so simple and folk like. It's not in the style of what I was writing when I was in college, but
Uh-huh.
he did. He said that it's interesting. He thought it was interesting because usually like that technique of string crossing is used so much that
Hmm.
like he would kind of steer his students away from like too much string crossing, because it can be a cliche, especially if you're like, okay, I want it to be very virtuosic,
Right.
like if
Right.
if it fits, but this is a little more subtle and subtle use of the technique, but it's all string crossings. It's only about a 2-minute piece, but
Okay. Of course, when you're writing a violin piece, since you're a violinist, you know you have a great advantage over a non-violinist trying to write a violin piece because
yeah,
for one thing, you can play it and you can tell, okay, that clunked. Like sometimes you think of stuff in your head that's cool, and even you might even play it on piano. It sounds cool, but for whatever reason,
right.
when you play it on violin, you're like clunk. That didn't
Oh
work,
man, happened
and
so
then you
many
just got to
times.
rewrite it so that it'll fit the instrument better.
Yeah.
You know what I'm
Oh
talking about.
god. Yeah.
So you have a great advantage to that.
Yeah.
Plus, you know all the things you can do with violin. You know,
Yeah.
does it have like those type of
Yeah.
special effects? Does it have like tremolos and harmonics and things like that in
As
it,
some
or
harmonics. Yeah. Well, this one is such a short piece, and I kind of want. I mean, I've got plenty of other violin pieces, but and I do a lot of improvising on the violin, so I use all those different effects. And with this particular piece, it's focusing on just the one technique, and I kind of want it, but it's such a short little piece. Because I've written pieces in the past where even when I was at Berkeley and even that orchestra piece, which I liked, but get an idea like, oh, here's my one chance to write a piece. I got to put everything in it,
yeah?
and so this I wanted to really focus this piece and with one idea and one kind of melody that just
To just be
sure
what
it's
it
going to
is.
yeah
Yeah.
yeah
Do you play any guitar too?
a tiny bit yeah
Okay. Have you ever
um,
composed on the
just
guitar?
no, not really.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, no, I just, I made some songs. I have some like folky songs that I've
Okay.
written, but like as far as like guitar solo, I tried. I did one guitar piece. I think it was like some right after college. Um, but yeah, it's kind of hard to write for, I think.
It is. Well, you know
Um,
what I discovered is guitar is actually really hard to play well. I mean, it's
yeah,
easy to learn a few chords and learn how to strum. You know, anybody can do that. But then when you want to
sure.
get to beyond that, it's hard. You know. I used to think it was easy
You
because
gotta
of
do
the
all the other.
frets. I thought the frets were a total cheat compared to like
Uh,
violin, you know? Like you don't even have to worry about
right.
playing in tune because you got the frets, they do everything. Now I think the exact
Yeah.
opposite. I think frets make are one of the things that make the guitar so hard. Because
Oh,
if you don't,
interesting.
the problem with frets
Don't
is
land right in the right
you
place.
don't get in there, you get this really awful twangy buzz. And by the time it does that, there's nothing you can do about it. Whereas like on
Yeah.
violin or cello, if you miss a note, you can
Slide
quickly
in.
adjust,
Yeah.
you know. So really changed my mind on that one. Plus the
Interesting.
thing that
Yeah.
kills me about guitar is I find it very hard to pick well on guitar. Like I
Ah,
always
like,
mispick. I hit all kinds of random notes, and that's what drives me crazy. So I finally gave up and I said, "Screw it! I'm just gonna practice cello. Forget about guitar."
I see you have an electric guitar back there.
Yeah, I hardly ever practice
It's
it.
just,
Yeah, it looks cool. It's more of a. I
yeah,
tell
it
everybody
looks
it's more of a
super cool.
prop now than anything else. That's Cowboy Matt's
Yeah.
guitar. So whenever Cowboy Matt has a video, he's got to have
Ah,
the guitar with him. Kind of like how Captain Hardinger
ah,
always has his cello with him in the Star Trek show.
ah.
Yeah.
Right. Okay.
Anyway,
But now the cello is more of a
you know what we
performance
should
art.
do? It'd be fun to do your piece for violin and cello. Do you still have the music for it?
Somewhere. Yeah.
How hard is it?
Kind of hard.
Well, yeah, just send it to me.
Yeah.
That'd be fun. Like we could figure out some way where
Okay.
like we could each, since we don't live in the same state, like we could each record our parts separately and then figure out how to edit it together. You know how they do that. Lots of people do that now.
Okay.
Yeah, that could be fun.
Yeah. Yeah. That going around. Hmm. Yeah. I'll dig it up. I'll see how I feel. I might
Yeah,
just have to write a new.
there you go. And a lot of your, you have a website, right? So,
I do.
and
Yeah.
we can find, so we got to put a link in the
TomSwafford.com.
description for your website and all. And I can't remember if you have a YouTube channel or not.
Yeah, I do. Yeah.
Okay, we can link to that too.
Yeah.
We'll put that down
Great.
there.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
I'll send.
trying to think what else. Do you have a blog?
I do have a blog on my
Oh, cool.
website.
Okay.
Yeah. It's in the
Okay.
about section. So if you go to about me and then at the very bottom is a blog. So
When was your last
yeah, I
blog
got
entry?
pretty recently, but the one I've only have two in the last 2 years. So, but the recent one was last week. So
Oh,
yeah, there's all kinds of stuff I'm thinking about. So yeah, I didn't even mention this movie making that I've been doing. So
oh, you're making a movie?
well, videos for these violin pieces. So I've written some. I recorded some improvisations on violin, and then they're pretty out there.
Cool.
So they're a little more. They're more on the experimental side, but and to kind of to further put to do something more with those pieces, I made videos
Hmm.
using found footage, things I found online, like old movies and stuff, and editing them together, and
Cool.
doing things. So that's all there. It's on my YouTube channel.
Okay, we'll check that out too. All right, links in the description. Wow. So, any other parting comments you want to say before we
Well, when
wrap it all up?
um, I didn't mention that when we were talking about our history, I think I've studied when I was really little. I took violin with your mom.
Oh,
I'm pretty sure in the Suzuki class.
okay.
Uh, like when I was like 3. Was she doing? Was she doing classes then
Yeah, she
with
did.
the
I mean,
marker involved?
she taught Suzuki private lessons pretty much her whole life, and then group
Ah,
lessons once a week. And She's still alive. She lives
Okay.
at in a retirement home now, so she's retired, doesn't teach anymore. But I still bug her
Okay.
to practice her violin whenever I see her. I usually see her about once a week.
Oh,
And because of COVID, of
oh, cool.
course, once COVID relaxes a little bit more, I want to actually just, we used to play concerts at the retirement home that she lives at. Even before she lived there, I used to do a lot of concerts there. So I had another friend who lived there. And so
Okay.
I want to get back into that again.
And that would be so great to do. I mean, I remember doing some of those, and I played at
Yeah.
for my mom's retirement home. So yeah,
Yeah.
that's a good thing to do.
I really enjoy it because, I mean, it's like they're, I mean, it's a small crowd. Like you have maybe 20 or 30 people in the audience, but there's quite a few of the people in the audience are really appreciative. They're really glad to be there and they're really happy to see you. And so, I mean, that's for me, that's all it really takes,
Oh yeah,
you know?
absolutely. Yeah, for sure. You really
So,
know you're doing something if you're really communicating with people and
yeah,
it's you. Yeah.
yeah. In a sense, that's kind of what we were doing when we were playing it on the street, on the sidewalk at Pike Place too. I
Yeah.
mean, oh, we never even talked about that. So, I mean, of course, actually, that was a really good experience for me, at least as a violin player, because it's like you get thrown to the wolves, right? You're out there on the sidewalk, there's cars honking, there's like, you know, drunks and street people walking by trying to steal your money, and then you're playing some classical music, you know, all this stuff is happening, right? And like, especially if you grew up as a typical violinist, where like you played in one recital a year, and you practiced all year to get it all perfect, and it was all like this. I mean, that is so far from what playing on the street is like, right?
Right.
When all this
Whole
stuff
different
is going
world.
on, it's total chaos. Plus, you have to learn how to project your sound because you
Yeah.
basically, if you don't have an amp, you're competing with all this stuff. So you just learn how to just be a performer,
Yeah. You have to
you
dig
know,
in and
dig in and it takes a lot of you got to get out of your little shell and project yourself to the crowd and you got to work with the crowd and you
hmm
know be with them and it's just a totally different deal but it can be really thrilling but so that completely changed my entire approach to classical music.
yeah.
That's a really
Yeah.
useful experience, I think.
Yeah. I ended up doing quite a bit of that in New York City. That's kind of how I made my living.
Oh,
So,
in the subways or where?
always, yep. It's
Oh,
always
cool.
in the morning. So, only the
Uh-huh.
morning. And so, I tried a couple times but it was just way too, speaking of chaos, way too chaotic at night. And I'd have to fight off with other musicians and for a spot. But the morning was like, eh, I think people were more receptive to violin in the morning. They're waiting for
Okay.
the train to go to work. They don't really want to go to work. And
Right.
I played in um, stations in Brooklyn that weren't, and I ended up joining the new music. This program called Music Under New York. So I had a
Oh,
sign, and it was more official, and I got to play
a badge and stuff.
in places like Grand Central Station, and um, yeah. So I really basically started doing that at Pike Place Market, and then I met my wife on the subway, so she heard me down the platform, and
That was it.
so that's all been good. But I'm definitely done with. I'm ready to move on. Definitely felt like that. I've got that accomplished what I need to accomplish, and
Okay.
I'm on to the next thing now. But
Um, before we go, did you ever know Ed Davis? He's a violinist and a violist who he lived in Manhattan
no,
for many years, but he was also from the Seattle area.
Oh, no, I don't think I met him.
Yeah. He had this band, which was basically just it was a duo. It was kind of like the Eurythmics, where it's just two people.
Oh,
His band was
ah,
called oh man, Bombardier and the Mechanic. And basically he wrote the songs, and he
oh,
it was sort of, or it was
okay.
sort of like, remember Captain and
Bombardier and the
Tennille?
Mechanic.
Remember Captain and Tennille from the 70s? I don't know if you remember that.
Oh yeah.
It was like
It
that.
was
So his
that kind
girlfriend
of a
was a
vibe.
singer with a really beautiful voice, and then Ed was the keyboard player, and he was the rest of the, and he composed most of the songs and stuff, and engineered the whole thing. And so,
Ah,
to me, it was like a similar dynamic. I always thought. Oh,
yeah.
yeah. Look up
Bombardier.
Bombardier and the Mechanic.
Huh.
Yeah, yeah. So you guys were in the big city at about the same time, but
Ah,
never quite crossed paths.
no, I had not.
Yeah,
So I guess it's pretty easy to do. It's so
yeah. It's
such
a
a
big
big place.
place. Yeah, yeah. Wild. And also, I do have a bit of a Boston connection because my daughter went to school in Massachusetts. She went to an engineering school
Oh,
in a town called Needham. Ever heard of that
oh,
place?
Needham. Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, my wife's cousin lives in Needham.
Okay.
I have not been there yet, but
Yeah.
definitely know it.
It was called
Interesting.
Olin College of Engineering. It's a private college. So I
Okay.
visited her a couple times, and also got to hang out in Boston, and get a little bit of flavor of the town there. So
Cool.
it's neat. Yeah.
But she's back west now, or
Yeah, now she's
not
back in the
rolling.
Seattle area.
Okay.
Yep.
Yeah, Boston. Yeah, it's nice out here. It's cold. It's snowing today. So
Really?
I yeah,
In
that's
March.
not. Yeah, that's. I prefer that it wasn't snowing now. I would definitely Seattle weather is better. I'll take gray
I have to
over.
admit, though, actually, I looked on the temperature for today. The low today in Seattle was 29 degrees.
Oh
So
gosh.
it didn't
Well, it's
snow,
cold
but it
all
got
over.
low. But
Oh
then,
man.
and I think the high was 44. So
Okay,
it
that's
is
not
kind of
different than
chilly
here.
for March, if over here
Wow.
even.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's surprising.
And we had a little bit of snow a couple weeks ago, tiny bit.
Okay.
So
Wow.
there you go.
Wow. Cold all over.
Yeah. All right, Tom. Well, it's really good to see you again and hang
Yeah,
out for
great
a
to see
little
you.
bit. So
Absolutely.
be sure to send
Thanks for
me so send me some pictures, or maybe I can probably just go to your website and grab some stuff. Because usually what I do on these interviews is I put a little strip up above us that has like pictures of the guest, that kind of just shows what they're
ah,
up to and that kind of thing. And then, of course, I can put links in the description, all that kind of stuff, and have people check out your website
cool.
and
Yeah, I'll
all your
just send
music.
you. Yeah, I'll send you. Yeah, I'll just send you some. I'll send you this stuff.
Okay.
Here, I'll do it right now.
Do you plan to be in the Seattle area ever again,
I
or?
definitely want to come back at some point. Maybe in the fall. Yeah,
Okay.
I'll definitely reach out to you. And
Yeah, for sure.
I haven't been back for a couple of years. For yeah, I think it's been like, gosh, I think it's been 4 years since I've been back. So yeah, definitely due
Cool.
for a
Well, bring your
Seattle
violin. We'll
visit.
have to do something. Either we can do some violin duets, or we can do something for violin and cello. We could
Yeah,
even go
yeah.
down to Pike Place and play on the street.
Oh my
That'd be
gosh.
fun.
Old times.
Yeah, that's cool. All right. Well, take care,
You too, Matt.
and we'll see each other on the internet
Awesome.
soon. Pranakasha Production.
fantastic creations emerging spontaneously from the space of life.
For the benefit of all beings everywhere.
We gotta change.